Welcome to AARO Voices, the podcast for American expatriates around the world. Brought to you by the Association of Americans Resident Overseas, AARO, pronounced AARO. Today we're talking about something that affects millions of Americans living abroad, the right to vote in U.S. elections. You may think voting from overseas is straightforward, but the reality is far more complex. And the rights we have today were hard-won through decades of advocacy. Let me take you back to 1973 when AARO was founded. At that time, if you were an American living abroad without a residence in the United States, it was almost impossible to vote in U.S. elections. Can you imagine? You were still a citizen, you still were subject to taxation, but you had no voice in your government. That changed thanks to one of the most creative advocacy campaigns in American history. In 1975, AARO helped spearhead the Teabag Campaign. Picture this: thousands of Americans around the world mailing tea bags to their representatives in Congress with a simple message referencing the Boston Tea Party, no taxation without representation, and asking them to vote for a bill giving them the right to vote. The campaign worked. Tea bags flooded congressional offices. The chairman of the House Administration Committee later said that the mail campaign exceeded any other issue that year by 5 or 6 times. As a result, on January 2, 1976, President Gerald R. Ford signed the Overseas Citizens Voting Rights Act. It was AARO's first major victory, but certainly not its last. Fast forward to today. The stakes could not be higher. It's a midterm election year, and control of the U.S. House and Senate can come down to a handful of seats. That means every vote matters, including the votes of Americans living overseas. As AARO President Doris Spear recently explained, voting has become the number one issue facing Americans abroad once again. Why? Because rights we thought were settled decades ago are now being rolled back. Doris told us that voting is an issue because, for the first time in decades, there are various actions being taken in the legal and the legislative arena which will have the effect of severely hampering the right to vote of Americans overseas. Here's the fundamental problem. Each of the 50 states has different requirements. You vote in the last state where you resided before leaving the U.S. This means that 5.5 million Americans living abroad are essentially voting in 50 different systems. This makes it incredibly difficult to have a unified voice in Washington. Some of the current challenges include the SAVE Act. Passed by the House in April 2025, it is gaining steam in the Senate. This bill would require overseas Americans to present proof of citizenship in person at their local election office. Think about that. If you're living in Paris, Tokyo, or Buenos Aires, how exactly do you show up in person at an election office in Peoria, Illinois? Then there is the PROVE Act. This bill would require Americans abroad to maintain a verifiable mailing address at a current residence in the United States. This means you'd need to maintain 2 residences, one where you actually live and one back in the U.S., just to vote. For most Americans overseas, that's simply impossible. How about disenfranchised citizens? Here's something most people don't know. 12 states don't allow certain American citizens born abroad to vote at all. These are typically children of U.S. citizens who were born and raised overseas. They are American citizens, but they can't vote because they did not establish residency in the United States. Finally, at the state level, many legislatures have recently enacted or are considering laws that would restrict access to voting. So, what is AARO doing about all this? A lot, actually, and this is where the organization really shines. First, there was the Dear 535 campaign. AARO collected survey responses from Americans overseas about the challenges they face. Then, they sent personalized letters to all 535 members of Congress, every senator, and every representative, with comments from their own constituents. When AARO representatives went to Washington for their annual Overseas Americans Week, they opened every meeting by handing these letters directly to lawmakers. Some representatives were genuinely surprised to learn that they actually had constituents overseas. AARO has also been filing friend of the court briefs in crucial legal cases. In Pennsylvania in 2024, they successfully defended overseas voters' ballots from being segregated and subjected to additional verification. In North Carolina in 2025, they successfully argued that a judge who lost the 2024 election could not change voting rules after the vote. And perhaps most importantly, AARO goes to Washington every year for Overseas Americans Week. And every year, they hold up to 65 meetings with congressional offices, educating lawmakers about the unique challenges facing Americans abroad. As Doris Spear explained, they are not asking for special treatment. They are asking that when laws are written, lawmakers simply remember that Americans abroad exist and consider how those laws will affect them. AARO's advocacy has led to real victories, beyond winning the right to vote in 1976 with the Overseas Citizens Voting Rights Act. AARO's advocacy led to the enactment in 1986 of the Uniformed Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, called UOCAVA. That victory guaranteed absentee voting for overseas citizens. And then the MOVE Act in 2009, which modernized voting methods and expanded electronic ballot delivery. They've also worked to expand voting rights for those who were citizens born abroad. But there's still so much work to do. The current threats to overseas voting rights are real and urgent. And this is where you come in. AARO is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization founded in 1973 with members in over 40 countries. They advocate on issues from voting to taxation to banking. All the challenges that come with living abroad while remaining an American citizen. Whether you are living in France, Germany, Japan, or anywhere else in the world, if you're an American citizen, your vote matters. And AARO is fighting to make sure that you can exercise that right. To learn more or become a member, visit AARO.org. That's AARO.org. Together, we can protect the rights that were won 50 years ago and ensure all Americans, no matter where they live, that they have a voice in their democracy. This is Gary Zerker for AARO Voices saying, be sure to vote. See you next time. Bye-bye.